Hello, I'm Cara Dahl Russell, once again bringing you pre-concert lectures from the beautiful spring outdoors. This is early April of 2022, and the pre-concert lecture was first presented in 2018 in April that I am sharing with you today. The work of Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, who lived from 1756 to 1791. In performance, a special performance of Piano Concerto No. 12 by the great Leon Fleisher. The musical selections on the program that day gave me the opportunity to talk about the symbiosis between the technical work of a musician and the emotional life of the musician. Intellect, heart, sense, and sensibility. And the interplay between those, and sometimes the interplay between our desire to think that music just happens spontaneously and the reality of the life work of musicians. Now, Mozart was, by any standard, a superb technician. And speaking of technical concerns, for someone like me who does a lot of pre-concert lectures, Mozart comes up time and time again, and Mozart is possibly the one composer that people know the most about. So my job is to find something new, or at least a new angle to approach him that may give some new insight to both him and his work. To start with, I try to find something that gets me interested, but I always consider my job done if I give you one new piece of insight, something to think about while you listen, and hopefully something deeper to ponder when you go home or after you listen. So if we're discussing the interplay between art and technique, between gift and skill, Mozart is possibly our most ripe example. We know that Mozart was a prodigy not only on multiple instruments, but in composing. He did have family training, but not every young pianist who plays the piano wants to make up his own pieces and make up his own rules. This is just who Mozart was. Now, generally, we think of Mozart as the first child prodigy. He wasn't. We know factually that there were others who came before him who had musical talent, capacity, and recognition at an early age. The difference is that they came along in a time period when music was considered the science of music. It was not just considered a technical skill, it was considered a learned craft, like cabinet making. Your work might be showcased in the palace, but you were just another servant who made the work that was purchased by the nobility or the royalty. So why do we consider Mozart the child prodigy that all gifted children are compared to even today? Timing. It was the luck of that time period and the savvy of Mozart's father to have a sense of the times and emphasize these trends. Young Mozart came along when musicians had stable jobs at court, and their courts had their own orchestras. So the familiarity of a musician or group of musicians, the way their reputations burnished the reputations of the royal house they were in, these things began to bring the name of an individual secular musician to the fore, such as in France, Lully, or Lully, as we say in American, and Haydn. In the previous generation, not only was music a family business, but it was often so much of a family business that it became generic, that all musicians in Germany, for a time, were referred to as Bach. Not as a compliment, but just as a job title. He is a Bach. He is a musician. At the same time, the growing ease of travel and the growth of the printing press and publishing also meant that the reputation of a musician that was previously spread only by word of mouth could now be spread in tours done by that musician and also in the mass-produced form of their printed work. Now, don't misunderstand me. Mozart was a great talent for any time period, but it was the particular confluence of the era into which he was born that added to his personal attributes, made him something larger, a new concept, the astounding child prodigy who took all of the European courts by storm. It also happens that his prominence rose in a time period when the taste in music was something technically more easy. Pardon the language, but Mozart said that music came to him as easily as shitting. After the technically complex toccatas and fugues of the Baroque era, the taste in music changed to simple melodies over an Alberti bass. Bum 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 bum. That's what we call the Alberti bass. Also, after centuries of music that was strictly and intentionally divided into distinct national styles, now, as we look at the music from this Mozart's period, Germany, England, France, Italy, Netherlands, even Russia, this same style of music was being shared everywhere for the first time in history. Partially because of the ease of travel, musicians could travel back and forth, and it became the classical era. So we have this confluence of all of these elements added to the printing press, and we have the perfect mechanism for someone to become world famous. Little Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. He took his innate ability, added ambition, drive, ego, talent, training, and a particular personality that made him feel equal to or better than the people who hired him. And we have this perfect, shaken, not stirred cocktail of social, political, artistic, and popular elements that made him the great child prodigy. Mozart also had the capacity to think about music in multiple ways at the same time. What works in the genre, solo, chamber, opera, or orchestra? What works at court? What works with the public? And what will sell when published? And he worked with all of these things simultaneously, and that is genius. He wasn't a musician who said, I don't care if they like it or not, or I don't care if it sells. He wanted every one of his pieces to do it all. Which brings us to the piano concerto we will hear today. Thinking laterally or outside the box, the piano box, Mozart wanted this work to not only be heard in the concert hall, but he wanted this work to be playable in the home by small groups of friends, so that he wrote it for a fairly small orchestral complement, knowing that it was going to be published in a version for piano and string quartet. Today, this small quartet version has even been recorded. So usually what you hear in the concert hall, you hear the 12th piano concerto, which was the first of a large group of piano concertos, some say 15, some say 17, all composed within 4 years. And we generally hear it on a smaller orchestral ensemble. It was generally considered to be for Mozart's own use as a soloist, although, as mentioned, also for publication. Being the first of this larger group of works composed and performed in Vienna, our soloist that will be featured, and I will also feature him in the recording that you'll hear, has spoken of it in contrast to works that Mozart composed in Salzburg. So it is very much a work of new beginnings, designed to be appealing and to sell. Professor Fleisher bears the distinction of being the oldest Grammy nominee for classical instrument solos for his All the Things You Are CD release of 2014, when he was 86. Fleisher himself was a gifted child prodigy and prodigious young performer, and has performed this work since his youth. And it's always a great joy and a rare treat to hear a work that a performer has grown with over time, because they get to know it on even that many more that many more variety of levels, and have years to think about a particular phrase. This concerto is known for having a variety of melodic motifs, so that it is all the more for him to dig into over the years. Fleisher has described Mozart's K414 as, quote, a beautiful little concerto, sparer and more direct than some of the pieces he wrote while he was still living in Salzburg, unquote. Some of you will know Mr. Fleischer's career includes a debilitating hand injury, so his performance career includes a before and after period. He has performed this concerto in both parts of his career. Recently, he recorded it in studio, released in 2008. And his 1957 performance recording of this concerto was released in November of last year. His performance is noted for a full-bodied singing tone and pinpoint responsiveness. So you'll want to notice, as you're looking at the orchestra to accompany him in this work, be aware of the technical change in the grouping of the orchestra. Basically, it's a string orchestra with a few woodwinds. You'll want to listen to different sound textures that this creates. It's also worth noting that the central section is a tribute in two aspects of the word. The main melodic subject is taken from an overture by Johann Christian Bach, so we have that technical musical tribute. It's also an emotional tribute, because Johann Christian Bach had been Mozart's childhood friend and teacher, and he had just died on January 1st of that year, 1782. Mozart said it was, quote, a sad day for the world of music, unquote. So once again, we have a work here with this complex interplay of technique and emotion, the public and the personal. The work of Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart is Piano Concerto No. 12. I'm Dahl Russell. Enjoy.